Welcome to another episode of Grief Heals, the podcast where we explore how it is that grief heals us with our relationship with ourselves, with one another, and our whole wide world. I am your host, Lisa Michelle Zega, and I am excited to have another conversation. Hello. My intention for today's podcast is that you feel loved, seen, supported, and celebrated. Yeah, just as you are, feeling exactly how you feel, going through exactly what you're going through, and still, feeling seen, loved, supported, and celebrated. You know, this morning I was listening to a podcast by two of my mentors, Melissa Tears and James Tripp. And they did a podcast recording together on James's podcast, which is called Agents of Change. And I was going to say it's episode 39, but somehow that doesn't sound right. But it's the most recent episode as of this recording date, which is November 29th of 2024. And anyway, part of what really encouraged me was, or what I was encouraged to do as a result of this podcast, which I haven't, by the way, even finished, is more self-hypnosis. And so one of the things that James said, he was talking about a Taoist aphorism that goes, in order to profit, you must invest in loss. And I remember the first time he said it, I was in a training with him and it really impacted me. And I meditated on it for a bit, and then it just sort of, flighted away. And then today he said it again in the podcast. And today it was in the context of how invested we can get in holding on to something, how woven into the fabric of our identity, maybe a certain story that we tell of ourselves can be. I don't even know if he said story, but that's the way it landed in me. And I thought about, wow, what story am I really invested in that feels like difficult to let go? And what investment might I make in a loss, in that loss, and the loss of that story that would bring great profit? And I thought about the story of my childhood and the way that my specific childhood troubles, tribulations, hardships impacted my life. And I'm so grateful. I genuinely am grateful for the experiences that I've had in life. And the reason why is because I'm genuinely grateful for the woman that I am today. But this story is showing up differently now because you may know, you may not know, depending on whether or not you've been listening to the podcast for a bit and following some of my personal journey. I am currently living part-time with my mom on my mom's property. I didn't have a quote unquote childhood home, so I haven't returned to my childhood home, but I've returned to my childhood womb. I've returned to a lot of way of being that was like the environment of my childhood growing up. And I've returned to a lot of young, parts of me like that feel very vulnerable, very at risk. And I've watched myself behave from that space of feeling at risk, feeling like I must defend myself. I've watched myself bring defenses up so quickly and so unnecessary to the current situation at times, right? Just absolutely my response. There's a saying in recovery that goes, if it's hysterical, it's historical. And I've witnessed myself have some hysterical responses to really minor questions, inquiries, whatever, that have felt like, I must defend myself. So in this context, I'm feeling like, wow, the investment that I have in that story of my vulnerability, of my pain, of my inability to control what was happening around me is not working for my present environment. It's not working for what I'm committed to creating for myself and for those in my ecosystem, right? And I'm like, oh, okay, so what story would I want to invest in? Be willing to invest in my loss that I might profit. And so one of the self-hypnosis practices that I did was first I brought myself into a trance state. And I simply did that by finding an object on the ceiling. I did this in the bathtub and finding an object and looking at that. And then I'd close my eyes, allow a wave of relaxation to wash over me, envision or sense into the number 10 fading with that relaxation coming from my head to my toe. Open my eyes again. Close my eyes as I sensed a number 9 fading and a wave of relaxation washing through my body. And I did this all the way until I got to 1. And then I chose to take it a little bit deeper, but that would have been sufficient. And then I simply imagined that I was at the top of a beautiful staircase and I was walking down this staircase to a beautiful door. And again, I did this from 10 to 1. I opened that door and I went in to meet with my wise advocate, who I just knew was going to have some gifts for me. So I was there and I kind of saw a picture of myself. I saw myself older, who I call Mimi, and that's my grandma name. I'm now a grandma, so I'm a Mimi. And I saw her for a moment and it was weird because she thanked me for the investment I've made in myself, but I was thanking her for the investment she was made in me. It kind of just felt like time collapsed. Then I saw Jesus. And I don't remember what Jesus said to me, but I sensed Jesus and I began to cry. And then I put my hands out in front of me with my palms facing up. And I placed the story of my childhood pain, this loss that I felt a call to invest in. And I asked it what its positive intention for me is, right? And I don't remember the exact sequence, but let's say it was connection. And I held connection in my hand, and then I was like, and what's under connection? If I could just drop to the intention under that. And at some point it was love, and at some point it was God, and at some point it was just light. And I held the light in my hand and I reached out my other palm and I was like, okay, there is a positive intention in letting go letting go of this story that I've held precious for a long time. And the final word as the positive intention, I don't remember what the first one is. I just remember I dropped through as I held each one, and I came to freedom, and I noticed tears coming down my cheeks. And then I held my hands up in front of my face, and facing each other with this positive intention of light, facing the positive intention of freedom. And then I just felt this sense of like, I'm going to wrap a cord of light and love around this hand holding light and the hand holding freedom. And I just held them facing one another. And they just naturally began to draw in, like I wasn't sensing a willingness, like a conscious, command to move those hands together. And I noticed them coming together, and I noticed that tears were just trailing down my face ever so gently. And I started picturing the faces of people that I know, of people that I love, of people that I work with. And I started to see them like grow, kind of as if light was emanating from them, and they were growing in stature in some kind of way. And there were smiles on their faces. I distinctly remember my teacher, Melissa Tears, looking at me. It's Tiers. When I say it, I hear tears, especially because I've been talking about the tears on my face, maybe. But and she was just smiling really big, and I was just gently crying. And those hands, so slowly, like I would open my eyes and I would notice them coming together, and I would close my eyes and I'd feel it. And then it's almost like I wanted to open my eyes and see what was happening. And then I would close my eyes. And then eventually I felt my fingertips come together, and it was like light and freedom coming together. And I was just thinking about how this shared intention, because part of my childhood, just the recognition, I went most of my life, by the way, without giving attention, energy, witness to the pain that I had experienced. The funny thing about that, I wasn't giving conscious witness or energy, but it's almost like in my subconscious, I kept being drawn back to that. And it mostly showed up in anxiousness in my body. It showed up in being highly reactive in my life. It showed up in areas of self-sabotage. I'm going to say it showed up in my breathing, like being an asthmatic for much of my childhood and into my adult years. It showed up, oh my goodness, in my bowel movements or lack thereof, like a lot of constipation. So there was just so much I was holding without holding in like witness, in love, in the tenderness that I was just totally craving. And when I became present to the things that I was holding, I became more present to other people. My body began to release, my body just began to release things that I was holding, right? I began to be able to go to the bathroom. And this is just like, it sounds like I'm speaking in like a once and done kind of and that's just absolutely not the case. It's just, I noticed that when I slow down, and this is still the truth, when I slow down to become present to myself and the moment that I'm in, I'm able to release tension. I'm able to be, I'm able to live in gratitude and appreciation and to settle into calm and peace and celebration and joy and fun and, just some stuff. So I think that's part of, why grief is so important to me, or even this loss or holding on to it. But it didn't present itself as a problem. Let me say it that way, or a challenge that I do not prefer, until I began staying here at my mom's place for weeks on end. And I recognized that no one seems to be able to unearth what I have going on the inside, like my mama. I don't have history with anyone. There's not a person on the planet that shares the kind of history that I share with my mom. She's the space, the energy I grew up in, right? Like, I mean, starting as an embryo, right? Just growing up inside of her with the chemical concoctions that, in her body, like they absorbed into my body, the certain kind of way of being, the way I understood peace and joy and fun and how to do life and all the things. And then at some point, I became present to the impact on me. And then I went through all kinds of stages, what we might even think of as just, I experienced anger, and I experienced like deep sadness, and I just, so many things. So many things, and why the naming of those things is escaping me now. Anger and sadness, resistance, denial, all of those emerged. And tenderness with myself for a long time, a harshness toward my mom. And then eventually a much greater compassion for myself, for my mom. But then living here, ways of being have become more like, I've become aware of ways of being, like specifically a hardness on the inside, which has felt like just a layer of self-protection, a defensiveness, a judgment. And it's been interesting. At first, it made me like, not it made me. At first, I felt very much like a hypocrite. Like, how can I even talk about grief work or healing or wholeness or love, compassion, joy, freedom, and be having all these internal responses? And then I got curious. And I've had so many awakenings and openings that have profited me. And particularly, I'm thinking of the people in the workshops that I'm doing for organizations these days. It seems to have really deepened our, like, containers, the word coming in my mind, but just the environment, right? The environment that we set for experiencing oneness and wholeness and freedom and love and possibility and all these things. So as I leaned in to my own experience and released my judgment of hypocrisy, and just came and, like, oh, how fascinating, and observed myself with some wonder, some like deep curiosity, is just opened up a lot to me. And it's opened up a lot in my relationship with my mom. And still, there's so much for me to learn and grow. And so my self-hypnosis in the bathtub, my curiosity around what loss might I invest in for my profit, for the profit of my ecosystem. And So right now, this is fresh. I am holding this loss as a gift. I am holding this loss as something that has shaped me. And I'm holding this loss like, well, what's coming to mind is like feeding it, not from the place of victim, from the place of I'm just checking in. I'm slowing down to say, Lise, is this true? Is this what's true from the deeper self? Is this what's wanting to come forth right now? It's like investing in it from the place of a gardener, of the one planting, of the one nurturing. Like, I guess there's been a way, at least that I've noticed being here, like responding like the seed that's breaking open. Like, what are you doing to me? What's happening to me? And more the one with her hand on the seed, knowing, hey, the seed's going to crack open so that the new life that is wanting to emerge from this seed gets to come forth. And so I am going to invest in this loss, continue to invest in this loss with a deeper curiosity, a place of wisdom, a place of not knowing, oh. See, I've thought I've understood. I've thought I've known. I've approached my loss now for many years like the expert on it. And now it's more like the inquirer, the one who's, ooh, what would you like to teach me? I'm here for it. Break me open. Let me experience something new. So, yeah, I think this is a little bit off topic, but somehow feels, well, whatever, it's emerging. This is our 54th episode. That seems so monumental to me. I'm so proud in a sense of that. Innocence. Doesn't that sound like innocence? Sounds like innocence. I'm quite celebratory, just that I've gotten to show up week after week after week for 54 some odd weeks. And that brings me to that I'm going to take a little respite. Eric and I agreed to put the podcast on pause, come back for a new season, a new year in 2025. So that's kind of exciting to me. But before I wrap up today, I essentially taught you a self-hypnosis technique. So I would like to recap that, but I'd also like to just have a little curiosity together around what it could mean to invest in the loss of our history and what's happened because of unwillingness to invest in that loss, or at least this is my own thoughts about it. I've been thinking so much about really not the history of the world, but the history of the US. Although I am wondering, because right now I'm watching the show, The Vikings, and I'm wondering about the loss in the history of the world. And because, there's these stories of conquering, of dominance, of slavery, of rape, of pillaging, and so much focus gets put on the victor of these stories. And then they get retold, like even our story of Thanksgiving, which we celebrated in the US yesterday. And it gets retold like in a way that makes the victor look good. Even sometimes like the victim, the one, oh, the struggle, the trial, the this, the that, but often not the dominance, the conquering, the squashing, the undoing of other civilizations. And then thinking about how that unwitnessed loss trickles forward in polarity and separation, and like it doesn't matter what happens to the oppressed as long as the oppressor benefits. And I have such a deep longing for us as a collective to experience our oneness, our wholeness, our compassion, as just being together, coming together. I long for that. I long for that in my community. I'm in Texas now, where I hear phrases like that nigger boy. And my struggle sometimes is to be with all of us in such a way that doesn't need to villainize, like I recognize that we're all, like we've all inherited these different ways of being. And we tend to like to feel good about ourselves. And one of the ways that I've noticed we do that is we ignore the things about ourselves that we don't like, the racist things within ourselves that we don't like, the hateful things, the things that separate us, the things that, when we're judging ourselves or others, we're hateful, we're mean, tend to dial down those kinds of reflections and think about our intentions and what we want and the good that we do. And what I'm noticing within myself is that the more I've let the parts of me that I have rejected, like even the wimpy parts of me, the parts that are whiny, the parts that, just want attention, the parts of me, like I don't know if other people do this, but sometimes I'm in a story, I'm listening to a story that a friend is telling, and I'm waiting for my name. I'm waiting to hear that I made a difference. There's this part of me that she leans forward and just looks for, are you going to say something good about me? Oh, did you recognize me? Do you see me? And do you know, I thought that she was so pathetic. I didn't want anybody to even know she was inside me, and yet she was there. And now I honor her. I cherish her. I'm like, yeah, thank you for calling out my attention all these years so that I can give you attention, so that I can recognize, oh, honey, yeah, you want to be seen. And, I'm like, don't we all just want to hear our names or be recognized? And maybe me more than others. Who knows? Who cares? But she's allowed at the table. She can banquet and feast with me. What I've noticed is when I let the stories surface about me, things that I've done that I thought, oh my gosh, I wouldn't even be accepted in society if these things got out. I remember being a 16-year-old girl And I'd been drinking. Maybe I'd been drinking. Had I even been drinking? Am I just wanting to remember that way? I don't even know. I do know this. A boy had broken up with me. I was crying. I was at his friend's house, our friend at the time, who I was absolutely not attracted to in any kind of way. And I wanted to be held. I remember this. And I pretended that I fell asleep, I think. And I kind of ground my body. Like I was doing some sort of grinding motion. And I essentially lured this young man into touching me. And I pretended to be, I must have been drinking because I pretended to have passed out. And I remember him questioning it, but I did all the things. I moved my body in all the ways to turn this young man, he was young, 16 too, on. And I really let him think that he had touched me without my volition, without my conscious awareness. And really, I trapped him into that situation. I never confessed it to him. I don't even remember. I don't know his last name. I remember his first name. But anytime that story would surface in my own awareness, I would push it so far down. Oh my gosh. Just like who does that? Entering my own grief has allowed me to just be with that part of me and to just, oh yeah, of course, honey, you just were longing to be held. And the rejection, I remember the boyfriend's name was Steve, the rejection that I felt from Steve, who, by the way, was so funny because even then I remember thinking, I'm not even that into this guy until he broke up with me. And then the level of rejection that I felt and the ways that I wanted to be held and the ways that I wanted to feel good and feel loved and all the things. And I got myself that. I did. And oh, it makes so much sense to me now. And then the older me judged her or whatever, because that's not really how I wanted to be held and loved. It was like a counterfeit. But you know what? Makes a ton of sense to me. And I can just have so much compassion and gratitude for the part of me that moves in such a way through life to find a way to get what I want, And that sounds dirty to me even to say in some ways now. And it's like, yeah, but I do. I find ways to have the experiences in life that I choose. And I'm learning to channel that and all the things. But why would I tell you this story? Like, what is she doing? Where is this going? I'll tell you why. Because she's welcome at my banqueting table. And the more parts of me I've recognized that get welcomed to my banqueting table, the more parts of humanity, the less judgment I have for what's out there. And you know what? That's why this story, the story of my childhood, the way that I've held it, investing in it matters to me. Because my mom is a beautiful, strong, resilient, kind, manipulative, selfish, resourceful, wonderful, generous, contradiction, complex person who I love. And I choose her. And I choose me. And I choose us. And in order to profit, we must choose to invest in loss. And I choose to profit for me, for you, for us. I choose it. Oh, I was going to end, but let me just tell you, very, very easy, simple self-hypnosis template is to find a focal point, rest your eyes, close your eyes, imagine or sense a number 10. Let a wave of relaxation come through your body, open your eyes, and just continue doing this until you walk yourself down to the number 1. And from there, you can just imagine how you would like to feel at a particular moment. And you can imagine what it's like experiencing what you're experiencing, feeling the way you want to feel, and putting it in the present tense. I mean, there are so many different self-hypnosis templates, so many. Or you can do what I did and put whatever you're going through in one hand, and maybe what you'd like to be experiencing in the other hand, just asking yourself from that relaxed state of being, the positive intention of what each hand is holding. And just let the hands do what they do and check in with that, whatever gleaning and learning you've had since that experience. I mean, there's just so many other ways, but that is one. That is one. So I'll leave you with that resource. I find hugs to be super resourceful. So I'm gonna open my arms wide. I'm gonna wrap around you, invite you to wrap around me and us. Squeeze and feel the goodness of what it's like to be held. And what if all parts of you could be held? And how might that ripple out in your ecosystem? That we might have a held world that feels whole. All right, until the new year, love, kisses, joy, all the things.
You've been listening to Grief Heals with Lisa Michelle Zega. The podcast is produced by me, Eric Simpson, in association with Jump Up and Down Productions. Music by Ken Dalian, Drunken Nights to Sunday Mornings, and Stefan Carlin, A Calming Ocean, A Common Notion. If you would like more information about the work Lisa does, point your browsers to legityou.com. That's LEGITYOU. Lisa can also be reached at Lisa Michelle at legityou.com. This has been a Jump Up and Down production.